Hey guys, today is going to be a short little video breaking down this portal VFX shot that I did. Before we get started, I just want to say a big thank you for all the support recently. It really means a lot to me. It's been amazing, so thank you guys. Also, I just want to let you know right now that I will not be creating a tutorial on this just because it'd be a super long video. But if you'd be interested in that style of video in the future, please let me know, and I might start making those types of videos. Anyways, getting started, I had to camera track the scene. Now I have many tutorials about my method of motion tracking, so make sure to go check those out. The links to those are in the description below. This shot was actually pretty easy to camera track since there were lots of areas of high contrast. I also got a phone gimbal for Christmas, so that really helped me with the footage, kind of made it less shaky and smooth. Once I was happy with my track, I set up the orientation of the scene so that the points on the wall were along the x-axis. To do this, I just selected the wall and made it the floor of the scene, and then I selected all of the objects in the camera and rotated it. That didn't really mess up the tracking because if you rotate all of them, all the dots and everything stay on that little plane. Next, it was on to modeling out the hole in the wall. I did this by creating some loop cuts in a plane to get the area where the hole was going to be, and then I deleted the face in the middle. To get it circular, I added a subdivision surface modifier. Now I actually changed this later. There's actually a better method to do this. But next, I started creating the objects in the kitchen. I used very basic shapes for the walls and objects since I knew I was going to add more complex geometry when I added some shading to the objects. The most complex object that I made were the chairs. It basically just added some loop cuts to a cube and then extruded the faces down to make the legs. All that was left to do was to add some bevels to the top and shade smooth. After I got the basic objects finished in the scene, I wanted to add some depth, so I made some doors kind of leading to the outside. Since my walls were planes, it actually made it really easy to cut out the doors and extrude the door frames. Just some basic extruding and loop cutting. Finally, for the background, I wanted to have some mountains in the distance and kind of rocky ground exterior, so I just used the Ant Landscape add-on. This actually comes free with Blender, so just make sure you enable that. Those basically generated some random landscapes for us to use. I played around with the seed until I got something that I liked for both the mountains and the ground. Once I was done with that, I was basically finished with the modeling. Like I said earlier, I had to remake the hole in the wall, just because I wanted to add a little ring around the hole, kind of like a portal in the game Portal. So I couldn't use the whole object that we made before because the subdivision surface modifier, when I applied that made the geometry very strange, and wasn't really able to make a little ring around it. So to get around this, I added in a circle mesh. I basically sized it up to be the same as the hole as before. And then when I went into edit mode, I extruded the circle out twice. The first time was just to make that little interior ring, and then the second time I made it, I basically just extruded it all the way out so it covered up the entire camera. Finally, it was on to shading of the scene. First, for the hole, I made the faces surrounding the hole a holdout texture. This basically just makes anything behind the texture render out as transparency. I set the inner ring to be a glowing blue color, trying to like imitate the portal feel, but I couldn't really find a result I liked, so I ended up changing it later. Next was the lighting of the scene. I decided to keep it simple and just added a cool HDRI I found off of HDRI Haven. After that, it was onto the black metal chairs. To be honest, I wish I had spent a little more time on this, just because I just added a Musgrave texture to be the normal of a black metal texture, and I didn't really like the way it turned out. I think there are some other things I could do, maybe test around in the future, but I just didn't have the time to correct it during the actual shot. Now for the floor, I found a wooden texture off of Texture Haven, but I ended up changing it to a better texture I found on Polygon. The first one, the tiles were just very small, so it looked like it was repeating a lot. Also, I didn't really have the reflections that I wanted in the scene, so the one I found on Polygon was just a better match. Now, if you are interested in my method of texturing, I actually have a tutorial up on my channel. Link is down in the description if you're interested. Now I repeated those same steps I did for the floor for the other materials in the room, including the marble countertop, white brick, and the tiled walls. The only notable thing is the white brick. I set the material to use the displacement map that came with the material. This actually displaced the geometry, and it kind of added more complex geometry to the scene. For this, I had to actually go into the experimental features of Blender and then enable a new thing called Adaptive Subdivision in the Subdivision Surface Modifier. This basically just subdivides the object based on how far it is away from the camera, just to save on some render times. After all the materials, I started compositing the scene. To me, the scene looked a little too flat when I first rendered it out. So to add some realism, I wanted to add some mist into the scene. Now, because Cycles takes forever to render volumetrics, I decided to actually try something new. Instead, I use a mist pass. This basically creates a certain range from the camera and creates a black and white gradient based on the object's position to the camera. White basically means that the object is far away from the camera, and then it goes to black, which means that the object is closer. Now, I use this mist pass as a factor to a screen mix node. And combine the render layers along with a brightened version of that render layer. This basically just added that kind of fog effect in the back. Now, because of our mist pass, this fog effect was only applied to the mountains and some of the rock on the exterior, and all of the kitchen and closer objects to the scene actually didn't have any fog in it. Now everything was looking pretty good except for the portal itself. We still had that crappy blue ring around it. So I decided to actually scrap that portal effect and go for more of a hole in the wall type of shot. So to do this, I simply just extruded the wall back, adding that kind of 3D layer. And then I added a brick texture to that interior portion. I made sure to line the brick texture to go along with the bricks in my actual scene. I just scaled and positioned it where I wanted it. Finally, it was time to render the animation. First, I rendered out an image sequence of just the render layers node. That's basically just the hole in the wall with nothing else. After I created a image node to basically replace our render layers node in the composite, I imported our new image sequence, then plugged that image sequence to be the alpha over node. This basically combined the video and the whole to be together. I rendered them out separately in order to keep the correct colors in the scene, since the color of the video and the color of the renders layers actually don't match. This way, once the whole is actually rendered out to be an image sequence, it's actually the same color as our video, so we can actually set those to be the same color when we do our final render. After plugging in the final alpha over node into the compositing, we just had to render out the animation one more time. And here is the result that we got. I was pretty happy with how everything turned out since the mist pass was kind of a new thing for me. If I could redo this shot, however, I would like to model out some more objects and place them in the scene to make it a little more lived in. Right now, there's just a big open floor and everything. So to me, if I could redo it, I would just add some more objects in the scene. Anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. We have a Discord and Patreon. Links to those can be found in the description below. But anyways, guys, thank you guys so much for sticking around, and I will see you guys later. Peace.